Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of our certification webinar series, LoRaWAN Self-Testing for Certification, where we deep dive into self-testing and all the things you need to know to get set up. It's great to have you all here today. Firstly, let us go over the housekeeping notes, highlighting a few things. If you're having any technical issues, simply press F5 for Windows or Command R on Mac to refresh the page, and it typically clears up any issues such as lagging. We will be doing a live question and answer session at the end, so make sure to submit your questions through the Q&A box located on your screen. You can submit them at any time throughout the webcast. You can download the slide deck we are going through today and find other resources on your screen as well. You will be able to view this webinar on demand using the same link you used to enter the webinar today. I'm Nisha Bhaskaran, Chief Technology Officer of SpireSpark International. I handle the design and maintenance of the certification specifications for the LoRaWAN Certification Committee. The key speaker for today is Paul Hampton, the Vice President of Certification with the LoRa Alliance. He brings a wealth of experience and knowledge on device certification. Welcome, Paul. Today, we will be covering the following topics. Over to you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Nisha. Today, we'll be covering what is self-testing and what is not self-testing. Self-testing benefits, what our members gain from being able to self-test their devices. How can members participate? Basically, how do you sign up? Keeping it honest, certainly one of the questions that we get a lot of is, how do we make sure people don't cheat? Also, our Authorized Test Lab network, which isn't going anywhere and is still in place. And where do I sign up? And then at the end, we also have a slide of links that are useful to you, not only today, but also as you pursue self-testing. So let's start with what isn't self-testing. Self-testing isn't a manufacturer certifying their own device. What it really is there's a number of names I've heard people call it. I've heard people call it self-testing. I've heard people call it self-declaration. I've heard people call it self-certification. My personal preference is self-testing because it's really much more descriptive of what we're actually doing. And what it isn't is allowing members to certify their own devices. Only the LoRaWAN or LoRa Alliance can certify LoRaWAN devices. It's not necessarily a replacement for full third-party independent testing. Most of the time, self-testing is accepted by most everybody in the marketplace, but you may on occasion find a municipality or a large corporation that is uncomfortable with a member company testing their own device for the purpose of certification. No matter how many safeguards we put in place, they just may not be comfortable with it. And at that point, you'll have to deal with that if you've chosen to self-test your device. And it's not applicable to all of the LoRaWAN options at this point in time. So, for example, we're just now launching the program just a few months ago, and we are only allowing members to do the basic testing of a device, so basic Class A, B, and C testing. If your device supports features like relay or it supports SHIC, those still have to be tested at an authorized test lab. So the big benefit, and we looked at this for quite some time, and the big benefit that we see for our members is multifold, really. Improved time to market. You now have the ability to control the process of getting your device certified and actually build it into your research and development process for a new product. So as you're developing that product, you can test it along the way using the LCTT, which is the LoRaWAN certification test tool, which we provide free to each member. You can use that tool to test your device as it goes through the process. And then when you're finally finished with your device, you can do your certification testing, submit your logs through our web certification system, and receive your certification for that device. Members retain control over your process. Again, throughout this process, you have control over how the device moves through the process. So for example, today as we go through a process with an authorized test lab, there may be bugs that you find during the testing. And those bugs can cause you a lot of delay in terms of getting your product to market, because you get through a cycle and you send it back to the lab, they test it. Hopefully they test positive, the correction fixed the bug, but sometimes it doesn't. And you get into these cycles. And so those cycles can actually take place in your own lab, and you have control over the process of managing it through the development and the certification process. And of course, lastly is reducing the cost. Sending a device out to a third-party lab was one of the challenges that I've heard from members since I started, was that the cost of having their devices tested for certification was compared to what they sell the device for was really quite high. And so this is a response to that concern and complaint that we were receiving from our members. So reducing the cost to getting your product to market is a big advantage to self-testing. Of course, only LoRa Alliance members can participate. Only LoRa Alliance members can certify or get certified devices on the market. Applicants, of course, must be members in good standing, meaning you don't have any dues that you haven't paid, those kinds of things. We also insist that you demonstrate knowledge of not only the testing process, but in the certification program in general, which includes a broad knowledge of LoRaWAN itself. We feel that that's important. We also feel it's very important that you understand what the certification process is, and we have documents available for you to reference to do that. The certification program management document, for example, is kind of the Bible, if you will, for certification of LoRaWAN products. We test to make sure that you have this kind of knowledge, and we do that with what we call a knowledge assessment. It's I think it's a 46-question test right now, and you just need to pass that test with an 80% or greater pass rate. And then last, we want to make sure that you have a proper test environment. We do require pictures of where you test your device. We do require that you list the gateways, the markets that you wish to test in, and the gateways that correspond to those markets, as well as the serial numbers of those gateways, just to make sure that you do have that hardware in place and are able to test the markets that you say you're planning on testing. So, one of the questions that comes up quite often is how do we keep the process honest? How do we make sure that the members, because the members are testing their own product, which always leads to some sort of question about whether they're being honest. How do we keep them honest? Well, the good news is that the tool that we offer, the LCTT, has built-in protections for that. I'm not going to share all those details with you, but we have the ability with LCTT to make sure that you don't change devices midstream in your certification testing. You don't go in and edit or audit any of the results. You can't go in and change a fail to a pass in the test report without us knowing that you did that. And so we have these breakpoints, if you will, or these stopgaps that allow us to make sure that the test results that we get from you as you've tested your device with LCTT are accurate and, of course, are all passing, which is the requirement for certifying your device. Another piece that we have as described in the program management document is that we do have the right to do random surveillance audits of your devices on the market. And so what we do, and what we can do anyway, is to go out on the market and pick up one of your devices or get one of your devices from the market and send it to an authorized test lab and have them test it, and then compare it to the test results that you submitted under the self-test program, which allows us then to make sure that two things really. One is that the devices that you're selling meet the requirements that you said it did when you did your self-testing, and also to make sure that there hasn't been any changes in that device that might impact its credibility for being certified. And so the surveillance audits give us a big benefit in terms of those two things, making sure that everybody's staying honest and making sure that you haven't changed your product after you launched it onto the market. As I mentioned earlier, the authorized test labs are here to stay. I can't stress how much these folks are a great resource of knowledge about LoRaWAN and finding bugs with devices that they've tested with LoRaWAN. And I would suggest and highly recommend that you build a relationship with one or more of the authorized test houses, because those people can tell you where to look when you've identified a problem with your device and you're stuck and spinning your wheels. These people can help you go through that process and identify the problem and help you correct it. So I strongly recommend that you build a relationship with an authorized test lab. They have the best knowledge about how to test these things in the marketplace. They're located all around the globe. There's probably one near you. If not, it's not very far away. And like I say, they're happy to help you get your product to market. Certainly they do charge a fee for that, but that's what we're all in business for, of course. So where do you sign up? How do you get involved in this? Well, we have a process by which you can fill out an online application, and it's pretty straightforward, not a lot of questions. We want to know things like I mentioned earlier, which markets you intend to build products for, which gateways you're using to test your devices, and who's responsible for the certification of those devices. You submit this online form and you'll get a response within 3 business days stating whether we need some more information or you're ready to move on to the next step. If you're moving on to the next step, then in a email response to your application, you will get a congratulations, you're approved for moving forward. And in that email is a link for all of your engineers who will be testing LoRaWAN products for the purpose of self-test, a link that they can follow to, take the test and hopefully, again, pass it with an 80% or greater. Once we have one or more of your engineers who have passed that test, then you'll be approved for self-testing and will be accepting your test reports for self-testing. We've recently launched the LoRaWAN web certification system, and the LWCS gives us now the ability to kind of help manage the process by which we certify the devices. You would then submit your test reports via LCTT through the LWCS and request your certification. Your test results would be analyzed and reviewed, make sure that everything is complete. We already know that for the most part, everything's going to certainly be accurate. And then if there aren't any questions and you've paid the necessary certification fees to the LoRa Alliance, you would be issued a certificate for your device. It's pretty similar to what we're using today, except now we've implemented the LWCS to kind of help us manage the process now. So lastly, I want to give you a slide with a lot of helpful links that you can reference. The certification program page, of course, is very helpful. There's a lot of information there for those members that have access to that. I highly recommend that you go and take a look at that, as well as the documents that are listed under the documents section of the certification page on Causeway. The certification program management document, I mentioned earlier that that's somewhat the kind of the Bible, if you will, for LoRaWAN certification. All the rules and regulations, if you will, are included in that document. And it's always a work in progress document. We're always adding things to it, changing things as we've seen we need to, and so on. And that's under the control of the certification committee. On that page, you can also find your initial download of LCTT. If you're new to the LoRa Alliance, you would then download LCTT from that location, and then any updates that come along after you've loaded LCTT on your test machine are done in terms of a push to your machine. So when you log into LCTT anytime after that, if there's an update available, LCTT will go fetch that and download it and help you install it. There's also a brief area in there about learning about self-testing. Doesn't cover much or anything more than what I've covered here today and in this webinar. But if you need to refresh yourself on anything that you may have in terms of questions, you may be able to get those answered there. We also have a list of authorized test labs on the LoRa Alliance website. Again, I highly encourage you to build a relationship with one or more of the authorized test labs, because they can help you get through this process. And then lastly, we have our CERT test, which is an email address that we use to answer questions about certification testing. It's looked at every day. We look at it probably more than 10 times a day, and we send the questions that we get through there to people that can answer those particular questions. They may not be the same person. The question may be different. Sometimes I get those questions. Sometimes our support team will answer those questions. It just depends on which it is. And then lastly, our contact us. If you have a general question about marketing, anything else in general about the LoRa Alliance, you can use that link to get to the LoRa Alliance and ask your specific question.
Thank you, Paul. That was indeed very informative. Now, why should you join the LoRa Alliance? If you're not already a member of the LoRa Alliance, make sure to check it out. There are a ton of member benefits, including growth, collaborating, accelerating, marketing, developing, and technical support. You can visit the LoRa Alliance website to learn more via the link located in the resources widget on your console. Now, let's move on to the question and answers portion of this webcast. Okay, let's move on to the first question. What specific equipment besides the gateway are you required to have? Paul?
Yeah, good question. Basically, you need a gateway for each of the markets that you intend to manufacture product for. So you need a gateway that will support EU 868 if you're planning on making product for that, US 915 if you're planning on making product for that, and so on. So a gateway for each of the markets that you plan on making products for. The other thing, of course, is the LCTT and a Windows-based computer to operate the LCTT. This version of LCTT is the exact same version that the authorized test houses or authorized test labs are using today. It's no different. It operates the same. You get the updates quarterly just as they do, and so on. And as I mentioned, the Windows machine to be able to run that, and really that's about it. The only other thing that we don't require, but you may want to investigate if you're having issues, is a desktop screen room or desktop anechoic chamber. These frequencies are shared amongst hundreds of other people in any given market, and they're license free, and so you just never know when you're going to get some type of interference that could perhaps interfere with your testing capabilities. So a desktop anechoic chamber is very useful in isolating your device for testing and making sure that the test goes smoothly.
Thank you, Paul. Let's move on to the next one. The question is, we set up the gateway with the LoRa packet forwarder for LCTT. What's the verified gateways? If we use the US 915 band, should we have 72 channel gateways? Is there a question bank for knowledge assessment tests?
Well, certainly for testing the US band, you need at least a 64 channel gateway to accurately test the device, being that the US band uses 64 channels. What was the rest of that question? Let me see if I can.
So, what are the verified gateways? Is there a question bank for knowledge assessment test?
The verified gateways, currently we really don't have a list of verified gateways. That's something we're working on, just so that we can provide folks with a list so that they can choose the gateway of their choice. But we don't have a list of verified gateways. We're working on it, and expect to see something around that, certainly before the middle of next year, first quarter preferably. Answer all that?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. And the next one. So the question is a Redwood equipment called LoRa tester. That's.
So what is it again, Nisha? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question just says that is a Redwood equipment called a LoRa tester.
Well, yes, there is. Redwood Communications does make a LoRaWAN test tool or test equipment. We haven't done any validation on that product as such. I know that we've been working with Redwood to develop some solutions that would allow us to leverage some of their equipment to simply have one piece of equipment that can do all of the different markets or all of the different band classes, just from one piece of equipment that Redwood is looking to supply. But that's a work in progress, and we haven't done that just yet.
Thank you. Okay, and moving on to the next one. Do we need a screen room or a desktop anechoic chamber to be approved for self-testing?
Yeah, so you don't need it. We don't require it. But as I mentioned earlier, these frequencies or these bands across the world that we use for LoRaWAN are shared amongst hundreds of other people, and the opportunity for interference that could skew your test results or even make your test results fail are great in some areas, depending on what kind of interference you might have in your particular location. So a desktop chamber at minimum is an ideal thing to help eliminate that kind of interference. And they're fairly economical. I mean, a screen room, if you want to get a screen room, you're looking at almost $50,000 US dollars to have one of those. And that's a little bit of an overkill unless you're doing some other development of different products that might require a screen room or something. The desktop chamber is perfect for this kind of testing.
Yes, thank you. The next one, can you elaborate on the background of recertifications when already having certified the product initially?
Yeah, okay, there's a couple of elements to that. One is that we have recently instituted a 5-year limit on certification of devices. So once you obtain certification of your device, it is certified for 5 years. And if you wish to retain certification for that device, you would need to go through the certification process again, as if it were a new product. The second element of that question, I believe, is recertifying a device that has changed since it originally was certified. So, for example, the firmware has changed. You've gone in and made some changes to how it communicates with the sensor that's attached to the LoRaWAN transceiver as such. Those kinds of changes, there isn't any one answer for that. There are some permissible changes that are defined in the certification program management document that allow you to make changes, again, within those guidelines and not have to recertify your device and still retain certification for that device. But there are also some changes that if you make would require you to go back and perhaps do some regression testing to retain your certification for that device.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it did. Let's move on to the next one. What specific expertise and resources are necessary for a company to qualify for the LoRaWAN certification program?
Yeah, so we've tried not to make it very difficult, but we also want to make sure that that the people that we authorize or the companies that we authorize have the best opportunity to provide quality testing and ensure that the results that we get are accurate and comparable to the test results that we've received from the ATLs. So there's a couple things that we do. One, as we mentioned earlier, we make sure that you have the gateways that necessary for the band classes that you claim that you're going to be producing product for. I also require that you provide the serial numbers of those gateways just to make sure that you're just not pulling something off the internet. Second is that we require a picture of your test environment. You can tell a lot from a picture. I'm one of those people that I've been an engineer for most of my career, and there are some habits that engineers have that are good, and there's some habits that engineers have that are bad. And a lot of those things are illustrated by the environment in which they keep and do their work in. So I like to get a picture of where you do your testing. It tells me a lot about how you'll be testing your end devices. And then lastly, we do have an assessment test, if you will, that focuses on 3 areas. One, it focuses on the LoRaWAN protocol. We want to check and make sure that you understand what you're testing. It's not particularly onerous, but there are some questions in there that you may have to think about. The second element that we test for is to make sure that you have some basic best practices in terms of testing. There's good ways to test things, and there's not so good ways to test things. We just kind of ask you a few questions about whether you have that skill set within you. And then lastly, we test to make sure that you understand the rules. The certification program management document that we published about 1.5 years ago now contains all of the rules and regulations, if you will, for the LoRa Alliance and for certifying devices. It covers things like, how do I certify using the certify by similarity process? What do I do if my device fails a test and I need to request a test case waiver, being that the device, we feel the device is fine, but the test is not being run correctly. It walks you through how to generate a test case waiver request and how we'll process that. And then what do I do when I make changes to a device, and how do I make sure that it retains its certification? All of that and more is contained in the certification program management document, and that document is evolving monthly. It seems like it's a living document, and it continues to grow and address things that continue to come up in terms of what the policies are from the LoRa Alliance perspective.
Great. Thank you, Paul, for all the detailed explanations. If you have any more questions, please feel free to get in touch with us via email or through the contacts mentioned on the website. So these are the questions we had. This webinar will be available on demand as well, if you would like to share it with your colleagues. Big thanks to all of you who have attended the webinar. It was great to have you all here.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. And as Nisha said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you.